it's always disgusting when we hear about these Africans that got rotten in these prisons and these heroic human beings whose crime was the fight for the happiness of African people and the return of our stolen resources. And it's an extraordinary position to be in, where you have to say that when a colonizer, when an occupation military force, a colonial military force in your community gets killed, that I didn't do it. And I mean, it's like, I mean, people in Afghanistan and people in Vietnam and others who were fighting colonial occupation forces, nobody accused them of committing a crime. I mean, they were celebrated and held high because they were patriots of their people, et cetera. So I just want to say that it's horrible. I mean, they have this brother, not just him. You know, some of them, some of the people in this room and in this meeting know personally. I mean, just great, warm people. If you don't know them personally, you know, they put their lives on the line in a very serious way. You know, people sometimes find it difficult to come to a meeting, on the one hand, to demonstrate some kind of political unity. Then you've got these comrades who put their lives on the line, you know, who went up against the power of the colonial state. This is the state that's making war all around the world right now. More than 120 some odd secret wars under the leadership of the United States happening all over Africa as we have this discussion. And so it's a military force of some significance. And these brothers and sisters, you know, stood up and went out against that. That's not a little thing. This was incredible. And so we have to salute Mumia and do what it is within our power to contribute to this brother coming home and exposing. I think we have to do this in a way that exposes the system as well. I remember when they had arrested Fred Hampton Jr. in Chicago. At the time, he was a local president of the Chicago International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. And they accused him of using a firebomb to destroy one of these predator, what do you call these people? These predator parasitic merchants in the community, a Korean so-called merchant. And, you know, we say he didn't do it, but he should have. so I mean, that was the position that, you know, we came out then. He didn't do it, but he should have. I want to thank everybody for participating up to now, and I want to discuss briefly the National Black Political Agenda for Self-Determination, which is really important. This is something that the coalition and I participated in, traveling, I think through something like 11 different states and the District of Columbia, holding statewide conventions to organize and to win African people to unity with this. This is something that came through a democratic process, this National Black Political Agenda for Self-Determination. So it wasn't just something that somebody wrote and then took someplace. We had a national convention in Washington, D.C. after we had conventions throughout states, you know, within the United States. And I just want to say briefly about this, that African people constitute a colonized population. We've said it over and over again, which means the whole people. The whole people lives under colonial domination. It's not just the working class, the whole people. And the thing is that in the struggle against colonialism, then we have to find a way to mobilize the broad masses of the people. We need artists, we need people who do work around prisons. These are people dedicated to trying to deal with these comrades in prisons, political prisoners. We need activists who are engaged in all kinds of activity trying to change the conditions of the African community. Because they are separately participating somehow in the struggle against colonialism. How do you do that? We build a national a national democratic program. So unite the whole mass of African people colonized. We call it a democratic program, national democratic program. Let's say national in the sense that it's the nation. It's the African nation engaged in this struggle for democracy, a national democratic program. And so that's what the National Black Political Agenda for Self-Determination provides, that kind of program that unites. It's a part of a national black political, national democratic program. So it revolutionary national democratic program. So it picks up on masses of African people where they're located in various ways and helps to consolidate this process of fighting against colonialism. And I just want to say just a couple of things about the declaration, and it helps to explain how we understand this 19 points that we're talking about and what it represents. Because everybody talks about self-determination one way or another, but what does it look like? And so part of the things that we've been constructing, you see different kinds of programs. The 10-point program, the Black Panther Party, it was a national, it was a revolutionary national democratic program. It wasn't the Black workers coming to power, but it was one that mobilized African people. There was something on there that addressed the issues of most African people, and that's what we're doing here. So the declaration says that, and it takes into consideration the time that we live and conditions that we struggle under. A critical moment in our history is upon us. In addition to the traditional centuries-long destitution and political repression that has characterized our existence and distorted virtually all our intra-communal relationships within the United States, there's now an escalation of police and other white violence directed at our people that demands a coherent response. I talked about that coherence earlier, today. The entire world is in a state of turmoil. The vast majority of the world's population that experiences poverty and cruelty as normal features of life is in a state of rebellion. This was November 2016. Because the world capitalist system owes its existence to the enslavement of our people and colonial domination of much of the world, capitalism rests uneasily on a fault line of oppression. The historical oppression of our people stems from this cruel fact of history. Like most peoples of the world, we trace our current conditions of existence to the birth of the capitalist system at the expense of our happiness and human and material resources. We recognize the escalation of terror against Black people that includes the state and popular attacks and police and civilian murder. We understand that the prominent expressions of white nationalism revealed through the electoral process to select a new president of the United States are due to the growth of resistance among oppressed populations of the world and within the United States. We recognize that the apparent social peace within the United States over the past 35 years has been illusory, a product of the successful brutal assault by the United States government on the struggle of Black people for justice and power in the 1960s. Our movement was obstructed by state-imposed repression that included the political murders of important leaders of our community. Among these leaders were Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, and others. The false sense of social peace during this past period also depended on the disruption of the then developing Black agenda that demanded peace, democracy, and end to poverty, political oppression, and the acquisition of Black power. The US government and its minions of appointed or anointed Black leaders have contributed to a defeatist outlook among our people that reduces our struggle to vain attempts to influence the two major US ruling parties to include the interests and aspirations of our people in the otherwise ruthless, terror-inducing imperialist agenda they normally represent. The US government's assault on our independent movement for Black political power has created a worldview that promotes the US electoral process as the only viable means of forging and pursuing an agenda favorable to our interests. The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations does not believe that our future should be in the hands of any institution that does not have its origin within our own community and has not been forged through the struggles of our people. Black people, therefore, are gathering to consolidate our own national Black political agenda for self-determination. With our national Black political agenda for self-determination, we claim responsibility for our own future, independent of the Democratic and Republican parties or any other organization or institution external to our community. We are fully aware of the long history of betrayal of our people by both parties and refuse to submit our destiny to a slavish dependency on either of them. As conscious women and men, we are declaring our intent to guarantee a future for our children and generations to come by creating an independent agenda for the progress of our people. We know that this agenda is not all-encompassing. It cannot be. Our movement is in a developing stage, having been re-energized most recently by the August 9, 2014 uprising of poor working-class young people on Canfield Drive in Ferguson, Missouri, after the police murder of 18-year-old Michael Brown. We recognize that our national Black political agenda for self-determination is in contention with the decisions made for us by the rulers of the United States. There are servants in our midst and other African people who may have legitimate disagreement with our views. But we cannot wait. History will not permit hesitation at this critical juncture. Our people demand participation in creating the future that awaits us. This development of our national Black political agenda for self-determination is not an attempt to create a new political party or organization. The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations is a coalition in the truest sense of the word. We are an organization of organizations and individuals who have chosen to unite around a common set of principles for self-determination and a conscious struggle against world imperialism. We have seen the defeat of previous attempts to create a Black agenda by prematurely creating new political formations before basic principles and organizational relationships were firmly established that required first loyalty to our people rather than to the Democratic Party. We can all look at that thing in Indiana, 1972, the National Black Political Convention there, where people came and made great speeches and wrote all kinds of wonderful declarations. I think what, 3,000 to 8,000 people, I've forgotten the total, attended that and expected all kinds of things. But before they got back to their home states instead of the Democratic Party that they were attached to pull the rug out, especially from the Black politicians, elected officials, et cetera, blew that away. And people are debating today whether or not it was a good thing, a bad thing, and how do you make this happen? It was defeated even before it started because this convention happened subsequent to the defeat of the Black Revolution. The revolution had been destroyed. The revolutionary organizations destroyed and what have you. So you had middle class militants and nationalists and what have you take this program out there, make bold speeches, et cetera, but they were not grounded with the revolutionary organization that had preceded them. So we call on all organizations currently not affiliated with the Black is Back Coalition to join us as part of a process that will extend the political influence of all our movements and organizations while preserving the independence of each. The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations does not attempt to function as a substitute for any existing organization. We simply provide a forum, a space for the overall expansion of our struggle for self-determination beyond the capacity of most individual organizations. We can see the world created by slavery and colonialism collapsing before our very eyes. The decline of imperialist white power is visible for the world to see and experience. Not only are the heroic peoples of the Middle East, South America, and Asia engaging imperialism in heated battles for control of their sovereignty and resources, so also are our people throughout Africa, Haiti, and various other places in the world, including Europe. The struggle against colonialism has breached the citadels of Europe and the US. White people of Europe, of France, and Belgium, for example, are living lives with the kind of insecurity that is common in the colonial territories of Africa and the Middle East, from which Europe has extorted lives and resources for centuries. We are taking up the task of developing our national Black political agenda for self-determination, while in the throes of a maturing resistance that is primarily a response to open police murder of African men, women, and children. In Dallas, Texas, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the actions of Michael Xavier Johnson and Gavin Cosmo Long represent the clearest movement toward an armed response to African murders by the US domestic military occupation force since 1972, when Mark Essex initiated an attack on the New Orleans Police Department. Like Essex, Johnson and Long briefly exposed the vulnerability and incompetence of US political forces with their attacks on domestic military occupation forces in Dallas, Texas on July 7th and Baton Rouge on July 17, 2016. The moment is urgent and history requires us to move decisively and without hesitation. It is within this context that we offer the national Black political agenda for self-determination for discussion and adoption by our people. And this was presented at the National Convention in Washington, D.C. that we held in November 2016. And obviously I don't have time to go through it, but I just want to say it deals with the first point on here is Black women. First point, the first thing in the national Black political agenda, with this national Black political agenda for self-determination, the entire Black or African nation declares our commitment to facilitate the elevation of African women to full equal partnership in our struggle to create a new world of freedom and socialist democracy for a united Black community, and a world shorn forever of bosses and workers and slaves and masters, and where African women will share the power to guarantee that African women are adequately empowered as equal architects of our new world. Point number two, the Black family. It comes out defense of the Black family, that we see that the attacks on our family as connected to the whole genocide campaign rooted in the Atlantic slave trade. Number three, Black community control of the police. This is a demand that came from this coalition, and it didn't just come. It came partially in response to the liberal response of Black Lives Matter that didn't say anything, didn't make any demands, didn't recognize the contradiction. It was something that even the oppressor was able to take on as its own. You saw Joe Biden and the rest of them, Black Lives Matter. What the hell have you said by saying that? So we said that we will say, replace that with Black community control of the police. That's a political solution, that it's a democratic solution. How can anybody be opposed to the democratic rights of the community to be in control of anybody who's running around our community with guns should be under the leadership of this community, authority. Free all political prisoners. That's number four. Number five, roll back and end mass incarceration. Everybody's talking about it. We were talking about it. Reparations is number six. We demand reparations consistent with international norms. I think Cam may have played a role in articulating number six. Number seven, self-defense. We declare our human right to armed self-defense from the violent attacks by white citizens and the assault and murders by the domestic military occupation forces that include various police organizations. Number eight, nationalize the banks and end forever the rule of capital. Number nine, full employment and a national minimum income. Number 10, the right to housing. Number 11, which is related, halt gentrification. Number 12, nurturing Black businesses. Number 13, some people may have a problem with that because they may say that is just capitalism, nurturing Black businesses. The fact is that you got to have an economy. I ain't talking about of that, and the Africans have to have an economy. For the African world, the fundamental contradiction around economics is not between capitalist and socialist economics, it's between socialist development, it's between development and non-development. So we should be able to say what that looks like in our own communities. That's our responsibility to do that. But they take these resources that come from our communities and they put them in institutions that create and nurture white businesses at the expense of the African community. Number 13, right to free education through postgraduate level. Number 14, free universal quality health care for all. Number 15, voting rights, the right to vote. That means the right to vote means that somebody is not going to come to your house at 5 o'clock in the morning with flashbang grenades attacking you because you don't vote, you are participating in elections in a way that they don't want you to participate in them. Number 6, not just Birmingham in 1963, which was recognized as an attack on the right to vote, but 2022 rather, when they come to my house and they use flashbang grenades, they raid properties and stuff like that because they said the Russians told us who to vote for. It's a struggle against our right to vote and participate in the electoral process on our own terms. Number 16, US out of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Number 17, the West must pay its debt to Africa and its descendants. Number 18, free Palestine. Down with Israeli apartheid. Number 19, climate change and toxic pollution created by capitalism must end. The climate contradiction is colonialism. There was no climate crisis until colonialism. Many of them today mark the beginning of the climate crisis in the world as being what was it? 17 what is it, 1750 or something like that. But what do they characterize the Industrial Revolution as having this significance? But it was colonialism. Because we weren't talking about a climate crisis, destroying the climate. When the indigenous people had control of this resource, this land, or there was no climate crisis. When African people, there was what do they call it, a little ice age that was created by 1600, was it 1619, something to that effect. There was a situation where something like 50 million indigenous people in the Americas died. And they died because of a crisis, a climate crisis that was created as a consequence of Europeans attacking them and pushing them out of the cities and stuff like that. So then you had the foliage overgrowing everything. So you had this release into the air. What is it? Carbon dioxide that goes into the air, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it changed, the climate, so that there was a mini ice age that came as a consequence of that. But what did it do when Africa was under such assault that millions and millions of African people were killed, pushed off the coast and things like that, running from the slavers and what have you, with then the same thing happening with the forest and the foliage overtaking cities, et cetera, and then the ecosystem of the whole Atlantic Ocean being changed because sharks literally learned to follow the slave ships leaving Africa, coming across the Atlantic, because they were going to eat well, because if there was any thing that any sick African got thrown overboard, because that was not going, it's going to make everybody else sick, and that's not going to be profitable. Any African that was maybe eating too much, that was impacting on the income, would impact, throw them overboard. And then Africans ourselves were jumping off the damn ships, and so sharks literally learned how to follow them all over. The whole ecosystem of the Atlantic Ocean was transformed as a consequence. So the climate crisis is a colonial crisis. That's fundamentally part of what I wanted to say. And when I see a lot of white environmentalists have some problems understanding that, because the fact of the matter is that the anti-colonial revolution, we are the real forces who are fighting to defend the climate, to defend the earth and what have you. And the presence of white people in these areas really is in many ways the beginning of the climate crisis that people are experiencing today. So that's part of what it is I wanted to say, and just to speak to this whole issue of the 19 points, because we've been locked into this situation subsequent to the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 1960s. Malcolm X had a really profound influence on the revolutionary struggle of our movement subsequent to Garvey. And it's not just that he said some Black things, but when you look at Muhammad Speaks, you know who organized Muhammad Speaks? That newspaper of the original Nation of Islam was created in Malcolm X's kitchen. And remember this thing about Malcolm X thing, on the back of it, what we want, what we believe. And it didn't say to make the white man like us or anything like that. It's an actual concrete program. As Black Panther Party, concrete program. This that we're looking at now in terms of the National Black Political Agenda for Self-Determination, concrete program. Self-determination looks a certain way, and there's a certain, and that's the thing that we have to fight for. Thank you, Comrade Vice Chair Lisa. Uhuru.